Hersheypark opened in the year 1906 and has since then become a destination for both theme park lovers and thrill seekers alike. I made my first visit as a kid back in 2011, and after 14 long years, I finally managed to get back and ride all the coasters this park has to offer, both new and old. Hersheypark has 14 operating roller coasters and a very deep lineup of good rides. Naturally, after getting on all of them, it's time to rank everything up. These are the roller coasters of Hersheypark, ranked from worst to best. Alright, coming in at the bottom at number 14 is of course going to be the park's kiddie coaster, Coco Cruiser, a Zamperla family gravity coaster opened in the year 2014. Over the course of my trip, going to 5 different parks, I rode 4 of these coasters, and Coco Cruiser was the best of them, as it has a slightly different ending that doesn't include this one very janky and uncomfortable transition that the others all had. Alas, this is just a kiddie coaster, so it ranks here. Moving on to number 13, we have Wild Mouse, a Mock Rides Wild Mouse, opened in 1999. I honestly considered putting this at the bottom just because my friend and I have some beef with this ride. By some freak accident, he dropped his phone through the crack in between the ride vehicle and the station platform while trying to put it away, and it was a very tough process of trying to get it back. Aside from that though, the ride was fine, no different than any other Wild Mouse really, and the model isn't really the most thrilling, so it's not going to rank any higher than here. Number 12 is Trailblazer, an Aero mine train, opened in 1974. Compared to some of the other mine trains I've ridden, I thought this one was fairly middle of the road. It wasn't as rough as some of the other ones, but it also lacked some of the thrills you will get on some mine trains. It's not a bad coaster by any means, but once again, a mine train just doesn't match the thrills you'll catch on most of the other coasters. Number 11, Super Duper Looper, a Schwarzkopf Looper, opened in 1977. While a step up from the mine train, Super Duper Looper for the most part is one of the more mild coasters in the park. I like how it uses the terrain to its advantage, and that drop into the vertical loop gives a solid pop of airtime in the back row. After that part of the ride though, it just kind of meanders around more than anything until hitting the rake run eventually. Like other Schwarzkopf loopers, such as Revolution at Six Flags Magic Mountain, I would say this is definitely a good coaster for someone wanting to experience their first inversion. Starting off the top 10, we have Comet, a PTC wooden coaster, opened in 1946. This coaster is just so bizarre to me from what I was seeing during my trip because it had the most consistently long line of any coaster in the park throughout our time there. We luckily managed to hit it at just the right time where it was basically a walk-on. Comet was definitely thrilling and had some good airtime moments, but it was just ridiculously rough and had me in pain while riding it. I do think this has potential if it could get retracked in some fashion, but for now it's just too rough for me to put it any higher. And now at number 9 is Jolly Rancher Remix, a Vekoma Boomerang, opened in 1991. While I'm not a fan of the B&M vest restraints that are on many of their new coasters, the vest restraints that are on some of these boomerangs have definitely made the ride experience better. That, along with the theming, makes Jolly Rancher Remix the best Vekoma boomerang I've been on by far. It was running pretty smooth, and the 6 inversions you go through were all fun and forceful when you aren't experiencing any headbanging. We got a back row ride, and going through that vertical loop backwards was actually pretty crazy. The only bad thing here is that the tunnel that's supposed to project the Jolly Rancher smell wasn't working while we were there, but overall this is a fun coaster even if it's a clone. Number 8 is Lightning Racer, a dueling GCI wooden coaster, opened in the year 2000. Probably my biggest disappointment from the park. I loved this coaster as a kid all those years ago, and I remember getting so many rides and loving it every time. It was because of that Lightning Racer actually held a spot in my top 50 for a very long time. However, despite getting multiple rides in different conditions on this trip, the coaster just wasn't as good as I remember. The first bit of the ride is fun and has some good pops of airtime, and of course the racing feature enhances it quite a bit. However, the ride dies so hard in the second half that I was just dumbfounded. It just got so slow and carried no speed into the brakes. Plus, even though the racing is cool, the Thunderside seems to win by a wide margin every single time, which kind of knocks that part of the ride. This is still a fun coaster, but I'm sad to see that I didn't love it as much as I used to. Number 7 is Laugh Track, a Mauer indoor spinning coaster, opened in 2015. I honestly didn't expect to put Laugh Track this high on the list, but here we are. I got 2 rides, both of which we started out facing backwards. This is one of those coasters that's just pure fun, as the combination of being in a dark building and spinning gives you that experience of not having any clue where you're going. The best part of the ride was that first drop while facing backwards. It was such a unique feeling getting thrust down the hill backwards, and makes me wish I could have experienced some of those coasters where they would turn the trains around backwards at times. This ride, of course, isn't the most thrilling thing ever, but it just gives a fun and comfortable ride experience that most people will love. Number 6 is Great Bear, a B&M invert, opened in 1998. I understand that Hersheypark only had so much land to work with here, but this is unfortunately the weakest B&M invert layout I've experienced. The inversions are all whippy and intense, like on any B&M invert, and that 0G roll is done perfectly and is the best part of the ride. Great Bear just has what feels like a lot of wasted track and where it just meanders around. Even saying this though, I don't think there's such thing as a bad B&M invert, barring some Batman clothes that aren't maintained well. Cough, great adventure. So this is still a very fun ride that definitely has its place in the park. At number 5 we have Fahrenheit, an Intamin vertical lift coaster, opened in 2008. This is a pretty cool unique coaster that you don't really see anywhere else. I got 3 rides on this, twice in the back and once in the front, and I definitely think that the back row is the way to go here. That first drop in the back row whips you over the edge and gives some great ejector airtime. It then goes through the Norwegian loop, which reminded me a lot of the Trust Dive from Air Force One, and then the Cobra Roll. These elements were alright, but nothing too special, and there was definitely a noticeable rattle in the valleys on either side of the Cobra Roll, but it wasn't anything unbearable. The best part of the ride is easily that finale with the double corkscrew, which gives some amazing whip in the back row, which is followed by the airtime hill that's very similar to the one found on Maverick. This may not be the best coaster Intamin's ever made, but it's a cool ride that you won't see in another park. And now the top 4. All these coasters currently reside in my top 50, and I think that you could rank these 4 in any way depending on preferences and it makes sense. These are all great coasters that give very different ride experiences, but all have the similarity of having very few flaws. That being said, my personal number 4 in the park is going to be Candemonium, a B&M hypercoaster, opened in 2020. I've heard a lot of negative talk about this coaster, especially in comparison to other B&M hypers before my trip, so I went in with tempered expectations. I would agree that the last part of this ride doesn't do much as a result of that trim break, but every part of the ride before that is absolutely amazing. The flirty you get on the first drop and the camelback that follows is absolutely top tier, and that second hill is one of the best profiled coaster elements ever done in my opinion. The airtime hills on the return trip also give some great floater airtime up until that trim break that hits on the last hill. While that last part of the ride is a bit slow and doesn't do much with the forces, it's still a very nice scenic moment going around the Kiss Fountain both on and off the ride. I currently have this ranked as my 3rd favorite B&M hyper, above rides like Diamondback, Mako, and Nitro. And this is overall a great coaster and an absolute spectacle is the first thing you see when entering the park. Number 3 is Stormrunner, an Intamin accelerator, opened in 2004. The Intamin hydraulic launch produces all of the best launches that I've personally experienced, including rides like Top Thrill Dragster, Accelerator, and of course Stormrunner. Experiencing that launch in the front row is the best element on any coaster in the park by far. It's extremely punchy and well sustained until that ascent up the top hat. It doesn't get much better than hearing
"Now get ready, here we go,"
before blasting from 0 to 72 in 2 seconds flat. After that, the airtime you get going over the top hat in the front row is pretty strong out of your seat moment before you get pressed hard into your seat as you fall into the valley below. I found myself unexpectedly graying out here. Maybe it was due to some dehydration, but it was very cool nonetheless. The flying snake dive is an out of control and unique moment at the end of the ride as well. There was a time that I had this ranked number 1 in the park, but unfortunately, even though the layout is good, the coasters above it just have layouts that are better and longer. This leads us into my number 2 coaster in the park, which is going to be Skyrush, an Intamin wing coaster, opened in 2012. This is by far one of the fastest paced and most intense coasters that I've ever ridden. It starts out with that speedy cable lift that just throws you over the edge into the layout. I didn't quite get that car crash sensation that others have talked about, despite riding in the front and back multiple times. Regardless, it's still a great first drop with some crazy ejector airtime. The airtime moments on this ride, while not plentiful, are some of the strongest that I've ever experienced. I never experienced the old lap bars, but I'm not the biggest fan of the new ones. Even if you manage to leave space while loading in, the strong moments of sustained positive G's on the ride will crush you into your seat and the lap bar into you, making it kind of impossible to not be stapled by the end of the ride. I do like, however, that the lap bars are programmed to let up a bit while on the brake run for the comfort of riders. It's a small but much appreciated touch. It isn't the longest, but it manages to pack an insane and intense ride into that layout with a very nice setting over a lake. I thought this had potential to be a top 10 coaster, and it didn't quite get there, but it wasn't that far outside of it. Skyrush is the coaster I chose to be my 200th credit, and it turned out to be a great choice. I also thought that it would be my favorite coaster in the park, but inevitably that spot has to go to Wildcats Revenge, an RMC iBox hybrid, opened in 2023. Of the 13 RMCs I've ridden, 11 of them sit in my top 50, and with the addition of Wildcats Revenge, there are now 4 in my top 10. The first great thing about this coaster comes as you're loading in. They have the screen displaying whether or not your lap bar is down far enough, positioned so that riders are able to see it. This way, I can know that if it's down far enough to be safe, while leaving myself a bunch of room to take in all that airtime. The ops, at least from my experience, won't go out of their way to staple you, so if done right, you can leave yourself an insane amount of room in that lap bar. The only element that I wasn't the biggest fan of here was the step-up underflip directly after the first drop. It isn't bad by any means, but it absolutely pales in comparison to the elements that follow. The camelback after the underflip, the 2 wave turns, the 0G stall, and the 2 0G rolls are all done flawlessly and come together for a nice and complete ride experience. I think that my favorite element was probably that camelback, as it's a very nice moment and it's amplified by having that looser lap bar. Wildcats Revenge is great in both the front row and back row, but I think I would lean slightly towards the front row being better. I thought the airtime was just as good in both rows, but I think I slightly prefer the inversions in the front for reasons I can't exactly put my finger on. I do tend to prefer most RMCs in the back row, but Wildcats Revenge is the exception alongside Air Force 1. This is an absolutely masterclass of a layout by Joe Draves, and it's an amazing new addition for this park. Do you agree with my list? Feel free to tell me your top 5 coasters at Hersheypark in the comments below, or even your entire park ranking if you're feeling ambitious. Hersheypark is easily one of the best parks I've ever been to, and its coaster lineup is matched only by a few others. If you haven't been to this park, I highly recommend planning a trip soon. Make sure to subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.